My fellow citizens of all nations, right now I'm going to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche's Human All Too Human, and just have in mind that this book has two parts, and I'm going to talk about both of them right now. Now, first things first is Nietzsche's warning about music. Be aware of the music you listen to. Like, seriously, it may seem like a very unimportant stuff at first, but if you were to truly think about it, it's certain type of musics are simply very dangerous for your mental health, or simply don't worth to listen. I mean, if you were to think about it, like if you are, for example, if you feel down and you listen to music that makes you even more feel even more pathetic, like it's bad for you. And especially what Nietzsche refers to are it's same goes for classical music. There are some type of classical music that is full of idea of they have some quotes from Bible, have this idea of sin it and mourn and pain and suffering. This is what it expressed, like dramatic music, for example, which in long term, like even short term period, it like really harms you. And he makes a very interesting remark about the ultra-modern music with its strong lungs and weak nerves is frightened above all things itself. Now, he refers to ultra-modern music of his time, like strong lungs and weak nerves. There are lots of things about having in our mind, like strong lungs and weak nerves. And like even today, these things gone even worse. Like essentially, today's music is music that has zero intelligence in it, and it just plays on the basic instinct of human emotions, which essentially becomes like impossible to listen, like very not very pleasurable to listen. And of course there are some type of music that expresses some thoughts, some opinions. For example, Ozzy Osbourne's "Life Won't Wait You, My Friend." It has a deep meaning in it. Life won't truly wait you, my friend. Almost all music has a magical effect only when we hear it speak the language of our past. And this refers to the dramatic music, which I mentioned. Such music requires us to have ears where our eyes are, right? Just like this thing, like today's music is just essentially a mess, not worth listening. I personally don't listen to it at all, and there are some classical music I also listen. Now, about real poets, I like poetry generally, and in this work he talks about poets and mentions certain stuff, so I want to read this to you. Real poets of emotion are for the most part shameless in practical life. Good poets of the future will only represent the real and turn his eyes away from all fantastic, superstitious, half-voiced, forgotten stories to which early poets devoted their power. Only reality through by a long way, not every reality, but a choice reality. The muse of the poets who is not in love with reality will not be reality, and will bear him children with hollow eyes and all too tender bones. And ancient poets demanded of the poets that he should be the teacher of grown men. Such a difference, like the demand was so different. And now this is the kind of very intriguing concept that will make you think for a long time. What determines our character? And here is his opinion, which became my opinion essentially. Our opinion. Our character is determined more by the absence of certain experiences than by the experiences we have undergone. By the absence of certain experiences. This is how our character is mostly determined, if you were to truly go like deeply think about it, because you cannot simply, everything simply cannot happen to you. It may be positive, negative, neutral, essentially. That things determine our character far more than things that we have experienced. And again, let me read this again for me more. Our character is determined more by the absence of certain experiences than by the experiences we have undergone. And again, this is very true. I really like this quote. Our character is determined more by the absence of certain experiences than by the experiences we have undergone. Like I can read this essentially forever. Now let's go through his remarks about beauty of a man. Let's read this first. All too beautiful and human. Nature is too beautiful for the poor mortal. One often feels, but now and then it's a profound contemplation of all that is human in itself, in its fullness, vigor, tenderness, and complexity. I have felt as if I must say in all humility, man also is too beautiful for the contemplation of men. Nor did I mean the moral man alone, but everyone. Like, man also is too beautiful for the contemplation of men. And here's the thing as well, like when we speak about the nature, like we forget that we ourselves are nature as well. Now, let's go through the books and readers part. Who are the worst readers, essentially, according to Nietzsche? The worst readers are those who act like plundering soldiers. They take out some things that they might use, cover the rest with fields and confusion, and blaspheme about the whole. What do you think about this thing? Honest books make readers honest. Like books you read makes you and shapes you. Like I personally experienced this in myself, and when I was at certain point, like became a fanatical Christian. Like it influenced not only my behavior and not only shaped me, but it also influenced my actions as well. Like books, they genuinely can influence our actions. Same goes for religious literature. This is true for religious literature and any other literature as well. And this is very, very, very powerful and underrated and underestimated thing in general in humanity. Writing and desire for victory. Writing should always indicate a victory, indeed a conquest of oneself which must be communicated to others for their behoof. There are, however, dyspeptic authors who only write when they cannot digest something or when something has remained stuck in their teeth. Through their anger, they try unconsciously to digest their reader too and exercise violence upon him. That is, they desire victory, but victory over others. I mean, better writers as well, better thinkers. Basically, good writing and good reading both are virtues and they grow together and decline together. I will never read an author of whom one cannot suspect that he wanted to make a book. Can. I will never read an author of whom one can suspect that he wanted to make a book, but only those writers whose thoughts unexpectedly became a book. Very profound way to look at it. He who commits his sufferings to paper becomes a gloomy author, but he becomes a serious one, and this is true even today, if he tells us what he has suffered and why he is now enjoying a pleasurable repose. A snack of good food often decides whether we are to look at the future with hollow eye or in hopeful mood. The same influence extends to the very highest and most intellectual states. Intellectual poverty, essentially, it's like a worst type of poverty in my mind. With intellectual poverty starts everything. Like if you are intellectually poor, then this is what you are. Like your decisions in life will be poor and pathetic. Like life is too short to spend it in intellectual poverty. Like it's very short for that thing. Truly short. Men nowadays live too much and think too little. Again, very true. There are dreadful people who, instead of solving a problem, complicate it for those who deal with it and make it harder to solve. Again, get rid of this type of people, avoid this type of people, and etc. The sage giving himself out to be a fool. The philanthropy of the sage sometimes makes him decide to pretend to be excited, enraged, or delighted, so that he may not hurt his surroundings by the coldness and rationality of his true nature. He kinda speaks about himself as well here, or this would be my guess. Improving our style means improving our ideas and nothing else. Again, this is also very true. So let's go through other notes as well. All good things have something lazy about them and lie like a cause in the middle. It's sort of like beauty belongs to the few. The living man has a right. False superiors German culture. It's like he criticizes German culture in many ways through the book, and it's clear that he could foresee the danger of this false superiority. Happy are those who have taste, even if it be a bad taste. And by the way, he predicted another thing, that maybe men will turn back into an ape. So let's hope that he's wrong. Happy are those who have taste, even if it be a bad taste, because not everybody has taste. Not all. Only by this character can one be wise as well, happy. At last, people are learning what it cost us so dear not to know in our yes, that we must first do superior actions and secondly seek the superior, wherever and under whatever name it is to be found. It has always been a great disaster to culture when human beings are worshipped. Again, so true. The conception of the artist as deceiver once grasps leads to important discoveries. There are highly gifted minds, which are always sterile only because from temperamental weakness they are too impatient to wait for their pregnancy. Many weep even at the enjoyment of painlessness. The inner eye is far bolder and more shameless than the outer. Faith indeed up to the present not been able to move real mountains, although I do not know who assumed that it could, but it can put mountains where there are none. For example, like faith generally has this power. But I mean, it proves the power of the face, not the thing this faithful people believe in. It just proves the power of the face itself, and that's all. Where nothing is, even trust has lost her right. Again, like when there is nothing there. A good friendship arises when one man deeply respects the other. It's about respect. The clever man will only make friends with industrious, essentially with diligent and hardworking. Learning from one's enemies is the best way to love them, for it inspires us with a grateful mood toward them. Learn from your enemies, and it will be the only way you can truly love them. Now, let's look at this thing. The eternal child. We think short-sighted that fairy tales and gaming belongs to children, as if at any age we should care to live without fairy tales and games. Our words and sentiments are indeed different, but the essential fact remains the same, as is proved by the child himself, looking on the games as his work and fairy tales as his trust. The shortness of lives ought to preserve us from a pedantic distinction between the different ages, as if every age brought something new, and poet ought one day to portray a man of 200 who really lives without fairy tales and games. Enjoy with your games, fairy tales. We seldom break our leg so long as life continues a toilsome upward climb. The danger comes when we begin to take things easily and choose the convenient path. In everything that is learned or experienced, the child, just like the man, sees doors, but for the former they are places to go, for the latter to go through. Again, like this is very, very true and very, very interesting thing to pay attention to. I grow old, but I'm always learning. Basically, this is like secret of health and vitality of Athens. This was the secret of health and vitality of Athens. Possessions possess. There are like things where we are possessed by our possessions. Like there is very little distinction there, and we should be aware of that thing. Like there are times when our own possessions are actually becoming the things that possess us. So we have to be aware when we are literally possessed by our possessions, because most of the time you don't own it. You are owned by it. Either we should hide our opinions or hide behind our opinions. So make your choice. So long as you are praised, or there may be another choice as well. So long as you are praised, believe that you are not yet on your own course, but on that of another. What is genius? To aspire to a lofty aim and to will the means to that aim. By imitation, the bad gains, the good loses credit, especially in arts. Basically, imitation is suicide for the good and great. The difficulty of climbing mountain is no gauge of their hate. And this is very important. This is about the chains I'm going to read right now. So, absence of feeling of new chains. So long as we do not feel that we are in some way dependent, we consider ourselves independent. A false conclusion that shows how proud man is, how eager for dominion. For he hereby assumes that he would always be sure to observe and recognize his dependence so soon as he suffered it. The primary hypothesis being that he generally lives in independence, and that should he lose that independence for once in a way, he would immediately detect a contrary sensation. Suppose, however, the reverse to be true, that he is always living in a complex state of dependence, but thinks himself free where, through long habits, he no longer feels the weight of the chain. He only suffers from new chains, and free will really means nothing more than an absence of feeling of new chains. Do you remember the movie Matrix? Maybe movie creators took the idea from this quote here. There is really resemblance to that thing. Now, problem of justice, like no action has a past. What it means here is that, like, when we judge the criminal based on his solo action, like, we ignore the other chain effects. So the parents, teachers, society, like, because if you were to truly think about morally, this is a huge flaw of the justice, because there is a good chance that they are also responsible for things. They are, in fact, like, what if you had 4 parents, etc., and they try and commit this crime, or not certainly because of that thing, but this also had an indirect affection to that. But no, we only judged, we forget the past in this case. So the teachers of free will essentially forget the past and say that no action has a past. We scream and shout this thing, and we judge a criminal based on his actions only. This is what we do. But actions has a past as well. Every action has its past. It's like chain effect thing. Neither a natural justice nor a natural injustice exists. Now, let me go through this thing here. Now, a kind of rest and contemplation. Beware lest your rest and contemplation resemble that of a dog before a butcher's stall, prevented by fear from advancing and by greed from retiring, and opening its eyes wide they thought they were mouse. Again, be aware of this thing. Can we forgive? How can we forgive them at all, if they know not what they do? We have nothing to forgive, but does a man ever fully know what he is doing? And if this point at least remains always debatable, men never have anything to forgive each other, and indulgence is for the reasonable man an impossible thing. Finally, if the evildoers had really known what they did, we should still only have a right to forgive if we had a right to accuse and punish, but we have not that right. We have not that right, essentially. Men are far more attached to their thoughts, images, than to their beloved, basically. This is why, like, they sacrifice themselves for nations, for their faith, for etc. And even for God, obviously. They separately sacrifice themselves for religion as a state and God for different reasons as well. Basically, essentially, the idea can be loved more than a person. It is might and not reason that decides. It is might and not reason that decides, or might makes justice. And look at the raw history. It's mostly that way. The pine tree seems to listen, the fir tree to wait and boast without impatience. They do not give a thought to the petty human beings below who is consumed by his impatience and his curiosity. Now that self-education and mutual education are becoming more widespread, the teacher in his usual form must become almost unnecessary. Friends eager to learn, who wish to master some branch of knowledge together, find in our age of books a shorter and more natural way than school and teachers. Basically, he talks about teaching in the age of books, right? And because we can self-treat ourselves, like there's this thing, like what I've learned myself, I still remember it. What I've learned myself. So, just like that, like, and what we would say if we saw this today's age of internet. I mean, this thing is educational right now that we are going through. So now let's go through the teacher and part as well. Teacher, there are no teachers essentially. As thinkers, we ought only to speak of self-teaching. The instruction of the young by others is either an experiment performed upon something as yet unknown and unknowable, or else a thorough leveling process in order to make the new members of society conform to the customs and manners that prevail for the time being. In both cases, the result is accordingly unworthy of a thinker. The handiwork of parents and teachers, whom some valiantly honest person has called our natural enemies. Let me read this thing. In both cases, the result is accordingly unworthy of a thinker. The handiwork of parents and teachers, whom some valiantly honest person has called our natural enemies. One day, when, as the world thinks, we have long since finished our education, we discover ourselves. Then begins the task of a thinker, and then in the time to summon him to our aid, as not as a teacher, but as a self-taught man who has experience. Basically, like when the entire world starts to think that our education is over, like we discover ourselves or finished. That's the way we discover ourselves. Now, teacher as a necessary evil. Let us have as few people as possible between the productive minds and the hungry and recipient minds. The middlemen almost unconsciously adulterate the food which they supply. For their work as middlemen, they want to hide a fee for themselves, and this is drawn for the original productive spirits, namely interest, admiration, leisure, money, and other advantages. Accordingly, we should always look upon the teachers as necessary evil, just like a merchant as an evil that we should make as small as possible. Perhaps the prevailing distress in Germany has its main cause in the fact that too many wish to live and live well by trade. In other words, desiring as far as possible to diminish prices for the producer and raise prices for the consumer, and thus to profit by the greatest possible loss to both. In the same way, we may certainly trace a main cause of the prevailing intellectual poverty in the superabundance of the teachers. It is because of the teachers that so little is learned and that so badly. It is because of teachers that so little is learned and so badly. A simple mode of life is nowadays difficult, requiring as it does far more reflection and gift for invention than ever very clever people possess. The solitary speaks. In compensation for much disgust, disheartenment, boredom, such as a lonely life without friends, books, duties, and passions must involve. We enjoy those short spans of deep communication with ourselves and with nature. He who fortifies himself completely against boredom fortifies himself against himself too. He will never drink the most powerful elixir from his own innermost spring. Those that travel for pleasure like animals, stupid and perspiring, they climb mountains. People forget to tell them that there were fine views on the way. End and goal. Not every end is the goal. The end of a melody is not its goal, and yet if a melody has not reached its end, it has also not reached its goal. A parable. Forgetting our purpose is the most frequent form of folly. Forgetting our purpose is the most frequent form of folly. Above all, we should beware of those who have the bitter feeling of the fisherman who, after a hard day's work, comes home in the evening with nets empty. Human life is cheap, packed. Essentially, cannon fodder thing. If we are clever, the one thing we need is to have joy in our heart. At someone. If we are clever, the best thing we can do is to be wise. Become a thinker. How can anyone become a thinker if he does not spend a third part of the day without passions, men, and books? And lastly, we should not let ourselves be burned for our opinions. We are not so certain of them. Again, we are not so certain of them. But we might let ourselves be burned for the right of possessing and changing our opinions. Again, every single one of us possesses this right to change our opinions. Disturbance of all the thinker. All that interrupts the teacher thinker in his thoughts disturbs him, as people say, must be regarded by him calmly as a new model who comes in by the door to offer himself to the artist. Interruption are the ravens which brings food to the recluse. Public opinion, private laziness. And this is it, the ending of our conversation about this work. Comment down below, share what one was your favorite quote from the book, and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. See you.